We're back with more NBA coverage. In this particular video, I'll be covering all the action from April 2nd to yesterday as the regular season concluded, and we are now moving into the play-in territory very soon. Figured that this makes perfect sense to try and get a video like this out before all of that begins. But to start things off, we will discuss the Hawks, who went 4-3 during this stretch to finish with 40 total wins on the season and clinch the 8th seed in the East. They had back-to-back losses to open things up against the Mavericks in Dallas and against the Knicks at home. They did rip off a 147-point outing against the Jazz on that back-to-back that got them a win ultimately, starting up a sort of positive streak for them during this time. You would have Trae Young put up 23 points and 15 assists in this ball game on 8 of 16 shooting. Relatively efficient game with Onyeka Okongwu in starting minutes, and I'm just glad that they made the decision during, I guess, the middle of the season to give him these minutes because he's been performing well for them ever since. 27 points and 12 rebounds for him on 12 of 18 shooting, along with 2 threes. Now, granted, this is against the Jazz, but in trying to clinch a play-in spot, you're going to do all that you can, really. You just got to take what you can get. They would lose against the Magic with their starters on the 8th, which would eventually become important, but they did go on a 3-game winning streak to end off the regular season, beating the Nets by 24 in a game that saw Zachary Rizalche put up a career-high 38 points. Granted, paltry Nets team. But once more, anything to make that necessary progress is just a plus for you. They then faced off against the 76ers and beat them by 24 in a game that saw Trae Young put up 36 points and 11 assists, continuing to lead the NBA in assists per game as he has done, while once again being fairly efficient for his standards in this game. 10 of 22 shooting, along with 6 threes and 10 of 12 shooting from the free throw line. It also helped that off the bench, Caris LeVert in 30 minutes put up 31 points on 12 of 15 shooting with 4 threes. If you can have Caris LeVert being that kind of 6-man, which is kind of how things were slated to go after they made the move to get DeAndre Hunter out of there. I'm not saying that LeVert is necessarily a good defender, but if he's giving you that kind of offensive production, or at least efficient offensive production off of the bench, the Hawks could have something going for them. But it's all about matchups. And once more, to finish off the regular season, they would face off against the Magic yesterday and won by 12, despite sitting all of their starters at this point. And to be honest, the Magic did as well. It was, just a time for some of the younger players and individuals who don't get a ton of minutes on both teams to just go out and play ball. And granted, players from both teams showed up, but to focus more on the Hawks here, you had Terrence Mann put up 19 points in 30 minutes. And you also had Keaton Wallace, who had gotten a little bit of playing time earlier in the season, in 37 minutes of play, despite chucking up 20 shots and only hitting 7, despite chucking up 7 threes and only hitting 1. He did do something pretty solid for himself. He nabbed 15 points, 11 rebounds, 15 assists, and 5 steals. One of the weirdest games you're going to really ever see from any player, and he was able to pull it off. So credit to him. Also had Daquan Plowden and Jacob Toppin, respectively, come off the bench and put up 27 points each. So it's a solid win, and they get into the very first play-in game for the Eastern Conference on a sort of tear, if you will. Ironically enough, their opponent will be the Magic tomorrow night on TNT. And, I mean, granted, the last time both teams as starters played, they did lose. But at the same time, a win against them, you might be feeling yourself just a little bit if you end off the regular season one-upping them. But in all of their matchups, the Magic did lose a game to the Hawks in February. But outside of that, they've won the last two of these particular matchups. And again, most of these teams have been relatively healthy surrounding the exact times of each of these matchups. So it's really just going to come down to who can make the most direct impact in that particular moment. Because well, with you being the 7 and 8 seeds, you have one more game after this. But if you're trying to play the matchup game, I don't know, this might be your shot to establish something. You have to commit to it. And if you don't, you just make things more difficult on yourself to where you might be out of the postseason altogether. You certainly don't want that. So we will see what happens there. Moving on to the Celtics, who went 5-2 in this time to close out the regular season, suffering losses to both the Heat and the Magic, which was just a weird one. They were held to 76 points. But as far as this particular game goes, it's not necessarily the biggest deal in the world. They didn't play any of their starters at all. Their leading scorers were Baylor Shireman and Peyton Pritchard, both in starting minutes and both shooting inefficiently from three. Like, the Celtics could afford to, over these last couple games, just give some restrictions to their players in terms of minutes. They didn't have to go all balls to the wall and just, I guess, get these players just tired out and overexerted in their energy. Because at this point, the Celtics were very much established as the 2 seed. There was no way, given how their counterparts in the Eastern Conference were doing, there was no way that with so few ball games left and with them having a pretty sizable advantage over their opponents, just surging past 10 games in front of the next closest team, they could afford to take a rest. They weren't falling below the 2 seed. And ultimately, with wins against the Suns, the Wizards by 34, because of course, the Knicks, in a game that I watched, and again, in this one, you have to credit the Celtics. I mean, the Knicks, with them getting Jalen Brunson back for a good portion of the latter stretch of the game, the Knicks actually had control for one of the first times this season against top 3 competition in the league overall. However, with Jason Tatum hitting a buzzer beater at the end of the third quarter, with him tying up the ball game on a clutch three-pointer near the end of the fourth quarter, and with him going ballistic in overtime, the Celtics were ultimately able to pull through and get this win. The Knicks did screw things up, and I will definitely detail that when I talk about the Knicks in depth. But they would then, after that Magic loss, win back-to-back ball games against the Hornets, which is not a really tough task. So they are set. Finished the season with a 61-21 record in a stretch that also saw them reach the most three-point attempts, I believe, by any team in NBA history this season. So, while that can be a pretty good thing, I guess, if you ask any member of that team, at the same time, there was also, for just a little bit, there was like a 3 or 4 game stretch where they were just shooting absolutely atrocious from deep. And that's the thing. When we talk about playoff basketball, are they really going to be able to keep that as consistent as possible? You don't know. You don't really know. That was their game plan throughout all of the regular season, postseason last year, and it worked for them. But naturally, in incremental ways, in gradual terms, that's gonna take its toll at some point. And they dealt with those there were just multiple pockets of time during the regular season where they just struggled from 3. You only have so many games offered to you in the postseason. You know, you can get away with being that inefficient for as long as they have been in some of these cases in the regular season, when you know that you are afforded another few games. There's no certainty about that in the postseason, because all it takes is a long enough stretch for you being cold down there, and you could be out. So they've definitely got to get that together, for sure. Moving on to the Nets, who went 1-5 during this time. Their only win coming against the Pelicans team that is honestly on the same path as them. They lost to the Timberwolves twice. They lost to the Knicks to close out the season in a game that saw the Knicks rest their starters for the most part. And that still wasn't enough. Now, what I did see that was interesting was that Drew Timme over these past few games had been getting some burn. And in shorter minutes, he had been playing relatively well. But obviously, with Drew Timme being a G Leaguer for quite a while and then getting the call up this late in the season, knowing that things are over, it just shows you where the Nets are at. I mean, they finished the season with the 12th seed somehow. Like, even that is just a crazy thing to say. But they finished with the 12th seed, logged 26 wins on the season, and they have a boatload of assets in their vault. Let's just put it like that. I think, honestly, that's a spot you want to be in. You know, because again, they had Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson being a pretty solid wing duo for all this time. I guess last offseason they finally understood that if they wanted to take that next step, it would have to take some sort of specific direction here. They couldn't just settle for being that mediocre squad led by a player who isn't really regarded as a superstar, Mikal Bridges, but yes, he was playing stellar with them. You weren't necessarily going to go far enough to call yourself a contender, and you just were not, with Mikal Bridges at the helm, going to be bad enough to acquire draft capital and get yourself in the lottery for potential game changers in the future and rebuild effectively, which is what they were able to eventually do, spurred by that eventual Bridges trade. They couldn't have anticipated the litany of injuries that took place this season. They couldn't have thought that Cameron Thomas would go down for that long so early in the year. But even then, even with Cameron Thomas being there and leading the way, that still might not have been enough. Because there were so many problems that just went on with this team. It's no reflection on Jordi Fernandez, but let's be honest. First-time head coaches, even though we'll be talking about a few first-time head coaches later on in the video, you don't always see it work out. More often than not, you're going to see things just get way worse under a first-timer before they get better. This is just a trial basis for Jordi Fernandez, and he's going to be given a little bit of leeway. Now, if this continues for, I guess, a couple more seasons, then you're probably moving Fernandez out of there. But for his very first time and in his very first season, he did what he could do. Yes, there were probably some mistakes that he made as a head coach. And granted, being in that position for the very first time, it's bound to happen. That's understandable. Still, there were other things that he had to oversee and account for that aren't even necessarily his fault. What the fuck was the roster construction? Let's talk about that. This roster was some shit. Okay? Because let's be honest. Matter of fact, let me just go and pull up Basketball Reference for the entire Nets roster. Because I need to detail just how many players logged minutes for this team this season. And you tell me if they were ever going to stand a chance as a somewhat capable team. I mean, quite literally. What the fuck, man? Over the course of this entire season, even though naturally you're going to list just a few players for opening day rosters and things like that, let me tell you just how many fucking players can come up with here that logged minutes for this team. Because there was no continuity when you really take things into consideration. Jalen Wilson, Keon Johnson, Nick Claxton, Cameron Johnson, Zaire Williams, Tyrese Martin, Noah Clowney, Trendon Watford, Day'Ron Sharp, Ben Simmons got waived. He's not with them anymore. Cameron Thomas, Dennis Schroeder, D'Angelo Russell, Tosan Evlin, Dorian Finney-Smith isn't there anymore. Shake Milton isn't there anymore. Reese Beekman isn't there anymore. Maxwell Lewis, Drew Timme, Dariq Whitehead, Killian Hayes, Tyson Etienne, Keon Shee, and Jalen Martin. Oh yeah, no, Reese Beekman was acquired. Why am I just got trigger happy there. He's still there, obviously. But yes, man, all those players on a roster that had a player count of 18, you had 24 different players cycling through there. And some of these individuals you literally would not know about if you were not a hardcore Nets fan. You can't tell me you knew who some of these players were. And these guys are getting legitimate burn in the NBA. So at that point, how can you really say that this team would stand a chance there? Your top player in minutes was Jalen Wilson. And then your next highest was Keon Johnson. A team led by those two individuals. Starting as well. Keyword. That's just not ideal for any team trying to find success. It's not. But again, this offseason and the draft gives them a grand opportunity, at least, to start blazing a path forward by hopefully moving on from some of these guys. Just, you don't need them all. You cannot possibly think that you are going to trend upward in the long run by keeping this entire roster. It just cannot go down that way. Obviously, free agency may be tough because let's be honest, who the fuck is gonna want to come to Brooklyn and play for this team? Who, in their right mind? So you're gonna have to try to work together some trades. Maybe there are a few trades you can make. You're gonna have to bank on that, and you're gonna have to build through the draft. Simple as that. But also easier said than done for a team in their position. Alright. Moving on to the Hornets, who went winless in their 7 April games and continued a streak that saw them pick up just a few wins sparingly over at least their last, near going on 15, 16 ball games, I believe. Just, nah. They would finish the season with a 19-63 record as the 14th seed in this Eastern Conference. And, just similar things. Similar things going on with the Hornets right now. Very similar things. They have got to try and acquire a pretty solid draft pick. Now, granted, yes, you may not. There are odds that you could get the first overall pick. But let's be honest, I would think that would be between the Jazz and Wizards, to be completely honest with you. You're probably going to get a very high lottery pick, though. And I can imagine that they're probably looking at some player who, yes, they're not going to be Cooper Flag per se, but they can still find a very great piece if they just scout correctly and use mindful intuition with their decision making, because that tends to be something that doesn't seem to register in the mindsets of people running the Hornets organization over the past decade plus. They just don't get it. They're going to have to figure that out. The draft is the only way. You just have to keep going through the process of attempting to rebuild. Because, again, they are another team who, yes, with some of their players in place, like LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, and Miles Bridges, they're a solid core, but they still have the need for other players around them. They need to figure out their backup center position, because Yusuf Nurkic is still not going to be the solution there. And ultimately, who the hell's going to want to go to Charlotte in free agency? Absolutely no one. So, same sentiments will be echoed there. Moving on to the Bulls, who have went 6-1 over this stretch to finish with a 39-43 record and finish as the 9th seed in the Eastern Conference, at least securing themselves a spot in the play-in. They ripped off 3 straight wins to open things up getting a 19-point victory in a game that saw them put up 137 points against the Raptors, and then won against the Trailblazers by 5 on the 4th to continue that streak, with Nikola Vucevic going off for 31 fucking points. But not to be outdone, you had Josh Giddey continuing, and I mean just prolonging this, I guess, tear he's been on since the start of the back half of this season. In this game, in 39 minutes, he had 15 points, 19 rebounds, and 12 assists with just 2 turnovers on the night. The shooting was not the best, but as a distributor, over the past month plus, he's been one of the best in the league. I don't think that can be denied at all. He's just going to work out there. They would also get a 14-point victory against the Hornets on the 6th. They met their match against the Cavs because, obviously, right? Losing by 22 in a game where they gave up 135 points. They would then beat the Heat by 8 on the 9th in a game that saw Josh Giddey, once more, put up 28 points, 16 rebounds, and 11 assists on the night, while also grabbing 2 steals and blocking 3 shots, shooting 11 of 19 from the field for himself, and also making 3 threes as well. Kevin Huerter had 22 points, and Nikola Vucevic also added a 28-point, 11-rebound double-double with near triple-double, including 8 assists, on 9 of 15 shooting for him. Mini foreshadowing? I don't know. They would then win back-to-back ball games as well to close out the season, as they would beat the Wizards by 30 in a game that saw one of their, I guess, lower-end players rise up in Julian Phillips, putting up 23 points and 9 rebounds in 28 minutes of play on 7-11 shooting with 3 threes. Matas Buzelis also had 3 threes and 20 points of his own. Nikola Vucevic added in a 15-point, 12-rebound double-double in this game. But again, the Wizards make any individual player just lock the hell in and go the fuck off, I guess. Then they beat the 76ers yesterday by 20. They rested a good amount of their players in this one. I guess they figured, because granted, again, with the advantage they had, with the amount of games that they led their counterparts in the Eastern Conference on the lower end by, there was almost no way, with so few ball games left, that they could fall out of the play-in as long as they maintained a relatively good streak, and they got off to that immediately to where they were just safe from there. So they're in the play-in. They still have a good amount to fight for, and honestly, it could be a pretty solid match for whoever they face. With the amount of strides you have seen both Josh Giddey and Kobe White take over this time, along with them starting to get it together in terms of overall chemistry, you can never really be too sure. So that should be an interesting development to follow. Moving on to the Cavs, who went 4-3 in this time. They opened things up by facing off against the Knicks. They beat the shit out of them, as they had done consistently throughout the season, winning by 19 points in a game that I watched live. Because you're thinking that this would be a marquee matchup, and that New York would actually show up to play against the top 3 opponent in the league and the top 2 team in their conference. But no, they would just continue to lose and drop these games. It's just so fucking crazy. But in other contests, they managed relatively well. They did get another win against the Spurs by 1. And then they had a stretch of really weird matches. They would eventually lose some of their starting caliber players to injuries and things like that, so you would naturally have them tail off a little bit. Still, in all of these games, you can argue that they were competitive outside of the aforementioned Bulls game that I mentioned, because they just wiped the floor with them. But they did lose to Sacramento by 7 on the 6th. In a game that I watched live, they lost to the Pacers. Granted, it was relative. It was so damn. It went down to the wire. I kid you not. And this was with them having just a roster full of bench players, pretty much, in the ball game. I mean, Jared Allen did step up to play, and then DeAndre Hunter, if you want to get technical, was their only big name, and even then, you can't really say that he's a household name that appeared in this ball game. But he did show up to play in it. He played really solid defense all around, which is a given for one of the best defending wings in the league. And he also had 9 total makes on the night, resulting in 23 points and also 11 rebounds. But then you also had players just go on crazy hot streaks. For whatever reason, with Darius Garland being sidelined, in comes Craig Porter Jr. finding a way to contribute, putting up 16 points on 7 of 17 shooting off the bench. You also had Tristan Thompson continue to get playing time for whatever reason. He did throw down a mean dunk somehow, and he grabbed 12 rebounds to go along with 7 points. You had Isaac Okoro shoot relatively well off the bench and put up 13 points. And then you had Sam Merrill just get hot. I kid you not, almost all, or at least 4 of his 5 threes on the night, resulting in his 15 points, came at the start of the fourth quarter as the Cavs were trying to rally back from the Pacers run that they were putting up. And they eventually did retake the lead before the Pacers did their thing. Ty Jerome also would have a 24-point outing in this game as well, leading the way despite the loss. Just adding another layer to a season that had been a career year for him. And that's just great to see for the former Warrior right there, being able to do this in a time where you're not necessarily going to get a lot of focus. You know what I mean? Seeing as so many of their core players were out, you wouldn't expect that game to get a whole lot of attention, and yet people had to tune in and see what was going on. It took a fully healthy and full starting lineup of the Pacers team to knock you off, which is just scary when you think about where the Cavs are at. Obviously, they've got to prove it still that they are a contender, but when you have that kind of overwhelming depth compared to everyone else, they would beat the Knicks yet again on the 11th by 6. And then yesterday, though they did lose to the Pacers, this time without any starters from any team playing, other than just to keep a consecutive game streak going, they still got really good work done overall. I kid you not. Jared Allen literally just stepped in for just a few seconds to make sure that he kept his streak intact of consecutive games played. And outside of that, you had the random players just going at it. This game went to double overtime yesterday. And you would have the Cavs lose, yes, but you had some pretty crazy games from all of these guys. Take this Naquan Tomlin person, for example, who in 47 minutes put up 24 points and 12 rebounds. He did foul out, but that's wild. It gets crazier. You had Jalen Tyson, the Rook, putting up 31 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists in 46 minutes on 12 of 25 shooting with 4 threes. You also had Craig Porter Jr. put up 20 points. And you also, off the bench, would have a couple more great contributions for their respective roles. You had Tristan Thompson put up 3 points and 20 rebounds in 43 minutes of play. And you also had Amani Bates get rare playing time for this Cleveland team. And let's just say that in this particular time, he made the most of it. In 42 minutes, he put up 25 points and 6 rebounds on 9 of 19 shooting with 7 threes on 15 shots. Maybe that's the sign of a turnaround, or maybe it could just be a one-game wonder on a roster that had already clinched to this point. They had to make sure that they won enough to just keep their distance from the Celtics. But they were ultimately set just a couple games in, and they would clinch the first seed, finishing with a 64-18 season in a year that was pretty historic for Kenny Atkinson. I would have to see, but he was either slated to, he may have actually set the record for most wins by a head coach in their first season with a very new team. At the very least, he was in the ballpark of that. And for a coach in Kenny Atkinson who's gone through a hell of a lot, this is by far the best team he's coached, and you can argue it's the best team he's ever had at the primary coach slot. So now they just await what could potentially happen in the play-in for their series to be decided. Moving on to the Mavericks, who went 2-4 over this stretch. They're winning against mediocre to bad Eastern Conference teams in the Hawks and Raptors respectively, and then dropping back-to-back ball games against the Clippers, ironically enough, before losing to the Grizzlies on April 13th as well. But the most damning loss in the most pressing game of this later stretch of the season was none other than their April 9th matchup against the Lakers. Luka Doncic's return to Dallas. Obviously, all the attention was going to go there, but you obviously have to factor in, too, that this was a game in which you wanted to see, on the Lakers side as well, Dorian Finney-Smith get his revenge against this team. And you also wanted to see Anthony Davis stick it to his former team. Obviously, it's well documented that he felt a way, he just couldn't have anticipated moving on from the Lakers as well. I'm not going to speculate on just how emotional he was. I don't even know if it can really compare. But naturally, establishing that kind of relationship with LeBron James while being his partner in crime, if you will, and also winning a championship for the first and only time in his NBA career in his very first damn season with the team. Obviously, there were going to be some ties that just reared their ugly head within the very first stretches of this ball game. And to be honest, it was looking bad throughout for the Mavericks, and namely Nico. I'm not going to get too far in depth as to how Doncic specifically performed, because that's going to be the focus for the Lakers primarily when I get to that point. But as far as the Mavericks go, it was just a pretty bad atmosphere. I mean, literally, they weren't even cheering on their own team as much as they were cheering on Luka Doncic literally every time he touched the basketball. And then, at multiple points in the ball game, the chants erupted into a collective fire Nico repeatedly. Let's also just add in as well that he is a fucking coward. Because he didn't sit in the stands at all. He stood by the tunnel while the game was going on for I guess most of the time. And then when shit really hit the fan, it felt like he just got out of there as fast as he could. Because I kid you not, the one thing I will say for Doncic is that, and when the game ended, he literally went up to every one of his Mav teammates and shook hands and had a little fun with them. He shook Jason Kidd's hand. Some of the assistant coaches that were there, he gave them some love. You saw everybody except for Nico Harrison. Where the fuck was he at? You was scared to face him? You weren't scared enough, clearly, to just move on from him out of the blue for the dumbest reasons imaginable. But at the same time, I suppose if you are willing to go behind your franchise player's back like that, then anything is possible. To make things even worse on that front, they had to recognize that they needed Anthony Davis to be the one to step up. And honestly, he did a poor job. Granted, he's a double-double machine, so you had to imagine he would get there anyways. But just 13 points and 11 rebounds in 33 minutes of play on 5 of 13 shooting. And not to mention that AD got outscored by PJ Washington Jr. and Najee Marshall in this ballgame. They got things so damn close without him going crazy. So that would have paid dividends. The marquee game of this stretch, and you just flop it. It's horrible, but granted, it's just how this kind of season has gone for the Mavericks so far. But nonetheless, they are now the 10 seed in the play-in in the Western Conference as well. I mean, I really don't know about their chances in it without Kyrie Irving, and if Anthony Davis isn't playing at his absolute best, but that's just going to be a situation to monitor. Likewise with exactly what the fuck has been going on with the Denver Nuggets over this stretch. I mean, oh my goodness. Now, yes, they sit with 50 wins on the regular season. They're the 4th seed in the Western Conference, and they clinched the playoff spot, but it has been a sloppy road to get there. They've went 3-3 since March 2nd. I mean, they are riding a 3-game winning streak, with the last couple wins coming against really solid ball clubs in the Grizzlies and Rockets. So I guess that's not too bad, but it was getting crazy. Like, you would see yet another game from Nikola Jokic against the Pacers on April 6th, where this man put up a 41-point triple-double, and they still lost by 5 to a Pacers team that naturally defensively couldn't really keep pace with them. All credit to Tyrese Halliburton, and I'll get to this side of the game for them in a bit when I talk about the Pacers. He didn't have the greatest of games, statistically speaking, and yet that kind of game from Jokic just goes to waste. Like, this is the problem with the Nuggets, man. Everything has got to be on his shoulders. It's him or no one almost every single time. And it got to a point where upper management got sick and tired of what was happening. The game before the stretch that saw them lose in double overtime, things really came to a head in that one, as more and more stuff would come out about Michael Malone and this sort of disconnect with the locker room and also just his own stances. Like, there was something that surfaced about him stating that players didn't watch film and things like that, and then they went dead silent when they were asked about what exactly was going on. Just not the greatest of looks. Now, for context, I suppose, there was tension between Calvin Booth, the general manager there, and Michael Malone on how to incorporate different personnel into the lineup, getting different members on staff, and engineering different moves as well. Things like that. I guess Michael Malone just wanted to have things be more traditional without having to worry about Calvin Booth breathing down his back and shit like that. And ultimately, the shit got so just drastic that they felt as though it was taken away from the focus of winning a championship. Like, the Nuggets had been dead even, just dropping some of the most head-scratching games imaginable, including this recent loss to the Timberwolves and this recent loss to the Pacers. But they would decide that before, I believe, this game against the Kings that they actually won, they, for whatever reason, fired Michael Malone. They fired him. And Calvin Booth, for that matter. I guess from all of the reports that I've heard, I guess it was going to be a situation where they just picked one or the other, but someone had to go in the offseason. But that's just it, and that's what confuses the hell out of me. Like, you saw how the Grizzlies have been doing with Yazalo after they fired Taylor Jenkins. They are now a set playing team, and depending on how things go, they could potentially lose both ball games and not even contend. At least the Nuggets don't have to worry about that, but how far do they believe that they are really going to go with a new head coach at the helm? I don't know. Obviously, some of the systems that Malone ran might be incorporated into the new head coach's offense, because Adelman has familiarity. He's been on the Nuggets staff as an assistant coach for 8 years at this point. He has experience as an assistant in the league, but let's be honest, even with him being the son of Rick Adelman, one of the more storied head coaches in the NBA, he himself is a first-timer. And it's this late in the season. Even if you wanted to incorporate different elements of a sort of new offense, how soon do you really think things will gel together as perfectly as you would like? That's never a situation that goes down when you implement that kind of change this late in a regular season. Like, you're a playoff team. Why not let Michael Malone just ride it out and see what happens in the offseason? For crying out loud, I thought he had the leeway. I'm not going to lie. I thought he had the leeway. He recently led them to the finals and won the only NBA championship that the Nuggets franchise has gotten in 2023. It's just less than a couple of years ago. Like, I don't see how you move on from that. Now, yes, with a lot of the moves they've made and also all of these deals that their stars have gotten, with the way that the rest of their roster is, it would be difficult to pick up other assets that you might need. And honestly, some of these decisions ultimately led to them losing core guys like Bruce Brown, like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. That's understood. At the same time, it's the only head coach Nikola Jokic has ever known. And for that matter, Jamal Murray. Meanwhile, again, he's been a standard of excellence there. Not only did he lead them to their first NBA championship, but for head coaches in Nuggets history, he leads in many metrics, including being the all-time winningest head coach in franchise history. But you don't even give him the grace of finishing out a full season. No, you just do away with him. I can't get behind that. I can't. And it's really just going to be tough for the Nuggets, man. Like, they don't, you know what I'm saying, deserve to necessarily undergo that situation. But at the same time, I guess all of it is self-imposed. So that's really what I have to say about that. Moving on to the Pistons, and during this time, they ended up going 2-5, so a little bit of a rough start to this month. But at the same time, I believe with their win against the Raptors on the 4th, after their just bad loss against the Thunder, that's a given, they would clinch their first playoff berth since 2018. They had already clinched their first 500 or above season since around that time as well. So, do what you will with that. They would then lose their next couple games after that to the Grizzlies and the Kings before beating the Knicks on the 10th. And then losing back-to-back ball games against the Bucks in rather interesting ways. I mean, obviously, the one that they lost on the 11th, they had most of their core guys playing. Cade Cunningham did do the best that he could. 36 points and 12 assists for him on 15 and 21 shooting. Malik Beasley hit 7 threes, and Jalen Duren added in 11 points and 16 rebounds, along with 5 assists. For what it's worth, it's just that they were no match for Giannis, which is typical. This next match against the Bucks will be pretty interesting, though. Both teams, with them clinching playoff spots, sat a good amount of their legitimate starters, and shit just got crazy. And one of the weirdest days of the NBA that you'll ever see, this game also went to overtime. Like, this shit was relatively competitive. I kid you not. In a game that saw Malik Beasley lead the team in scoring with 23 points and 7 threes, and no one else score over 18 points. The Pistons took it to a Bucks squad that had Pat Connaughton lead the way for them in a rare outing for his standard, and I'll get to that when I talk about Milwaukee. But they would lose in overtime 140 to 133. So they are first round bound, and let's just say that their matchup is pretty fucking favorable if you really think long and hard about it. They've got a very enticing matchup. So we'll see how that goes. Moving on to the Golden State Warriors, who over the course of this time they went 4-3. They did score huge back-to-back wins. First, in a game that I watched between the Warriors and none other than the Lakers, they ended up avoiding the season sweep, getting their very first win of the season against this team, and just dominating them earlier on. It got closer as the game went on in time, naturally so, with a matchup involving LeBron James and Stephen Curry. But the Warriors, to their credit, did a great job of locking down Luka Doncic, even in a game that saw LeBron and Austin Reeves go absolutely stupid, especially late. Like, the sequence was just so weird. You had, like, Stephen Curry and even Brandon Podziemski hitting multiple shots to supposedly close out the ball game, and then Austin Reeves just responded with deep three after deep three to try and give the Lakers life. But it wasn't enough on this night. This is the same man who, on December 25th, managed to get a game-winning layup against the Warriors in Chase Center. But that's neither here nor there. This was now April 3rd, and the Warriors would reign victorious here with a great game from Stephen Curry, per usual, on a early April tear that saw him average around 37 points per game. He had 37 in this one with 4 threes and also 6 assists. Brandon Podziemski, over the last few ball games, even during this stretch, managed to really step his game up. At a certain point, he had at least 18 points in the last 10 ball games. He had 53s over the last 10 ball games as well. So, in this one, that would continue with a 28-point night that saw him shoot 8 of 10 from deep and also grab 8 rebounds, dish out 6 assists with just a single turnover, also gets a steal for good luck. Jonathan Kuminga off the bench would also provide 18 points and 9 rebounds with 4 assists on 7-12 shooting. In the next game they won, they would face off against the Nuggets, also winning 118 to 104. In a game that saw Stephen Curry put up 36 points in this one, with shooting splits of 13 of 24 shooting overall and also hitting 7 threes. Brandon Podziemski, once more, 26 points, 8 rebounds, and 6 assists for him with 2 steals on 10 of 16 shooting with 4 threes. Jimmy Butler had 19 points, 5 assists, 3 rebounds, and 5 steals with just a single turnover. On 6 of 13 shooting, he also hit a 3 for good luck. The real downer, I guess, well, there would be multiple downers. But just to preface as well, getting into the rest of their wins, they beat the Suns, beat the brakes off the Suns. 133 to 95 in a game that saw all the star players just relatively be as efficient as possible. And this was a by committee win, if I do say so myself. They would also win against the Trailblazers in a game that saw Stephen Curry get slightly injured on his thumb, but they were able to pull out a victory against this team 103-86. In between all of those wins, though, there would be some huge letdowns, and I mean very huge in the grand scheme of things. You know, the Warriors were essentially as good as set for the play-in prior to the Jimmy Butler trade. They had done exceptionally well during the stretch, and granted, even with how things played out, they clearly went on a tear as soon as Jimmy Butler III got there, but they were playing catch-up for the entire time because you're trying to avoid the play-in. And even though you might have gotten in a place just a week or so ago where you were in the playoffs, the West was so damn tight to where 3 through 8 for just a little bit of time was just all over the place. You could literally lose one game and you would slide all the way down into the play-in. And inch by inch, that is exactly what would happen to the Warriors. Now, granted, it's on them, because if you get off to a faster start, you don't have to worry as hard about avoiding the play-in. But with a loss to the Rockets that saw Stephen Curry put up just 2 points, that was all the buzz in this one. Or I believe 3 points it was this time. Yeah, 3 points and 8 assists. Ironically enough, those 3 points came on a fucking half-court buzzer beater. Pretty interesting when you think about it. But yeah, that was not a game that they could afford to lose. Then you get into them playing against the Spurs on the 9th in a game that saw them take a great double-digit lead and then lose to none other than fucking Harrison Barnes hitting a game-winning three-pointer over Jimmy Butler III, playing the best defense you can on that particular shot. It's set up for what would be quite literally one of the most important games in the past few seasons between the Warriors and the Clippers on the 13th. And I was not able to catch everything, but I was doing my best to track the game as it was going on. And both teams were fighting for their playoff lives, because the loser would have to settle for a lower seed or a potential play-in berth. Like the Clippers, they were the 4th seed at the time, they were the 5th seed at the time. The lowest they could drop to was 7. The Warriors could also be 6 or 7, depending on if they won or lost. And it was just competitive through and through. You know, neither team was able to get a vast edge on the other. It was close all the way through. And it got so damn contested that we got into overtime on what was the final active game of the 24-25 regular season. 5 extra minutes to determine who would clinch the playoff berth and who would have to settle for the play-in. And I did end up getting in just in time to see things pan out. They just couldn't guard Kawhi Leonard. And then, offensively, responses were there for a little while. And then shit hit the fan. Stephen Curry would naturally face a double team pretty much every time he got down the court. He makes the good zip pass to Gary Payton II, who is doing his best to penetrate inside the paint, and he finds the open read with Draymond Green in the dunker spot. Obviously, he's not necessarily going to throw it down, but a simple layup would suffice. The man decides to foul bait and smokes the layup. The Clippers go down and eventually would get themselves in position to hit just a single free throw, because Kawhi Leonard missed the first one. Then the Warriors would get the ball back and advance the ball halfway up the court. Stephen Curry would once again, on the inbound, be double teamed, damn near triple teamed, because you would have to understand that pretty much every single player on the court knows where they want to go with the ball in that moment. You know it would go to Stephen Curry. But you have only 5 seconds if you're the Warriors offense to pass it in. And you can't spend that time just trying to force it there. They decide to get Buddy Hield out in space, and they lead pass it to him with Norman Powell on his ass. I guess in Buddy Hield's case, getting the ball with just a little bit of time, it would have been a lot better for him to maybe take just a few seconds to distract the defense, get them strapped onto you, and maybe free up another shooter on the team, optimally Stephen Curry, but maybe another individual, for a better and more open look. What he proceeded to do instead was chuck up a shot that bricked off the side of the backboard. Clippers would hit a couple free throws, and the Warriors would lose 119 to 124. They tried their hardest in a game that saw Jimmy Butler put up 30 points and 9 assists on 12 of 20 shooting. A game that saw Stephen Curry go off for 21 points in between the fourth quarter and overtime to put up 36 points overall on the night with 7 threes. And with Brandon Podziemski playing 43 minutes, putting up 19 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, and a block on 7 of 11 shooting with 2 threes. It wasn't enough. It just was not enough. And now they're going to have to try to weather the storm in potentially 2 games, seeing as they are the highest play-in seed in the Western Conference. So they're going to get their chances, but they were in this spot last year, and we know what happened with that. So they just have to be careful about the waters that they're treading. That's all I can say. Moving on to the Rockets, who over the course of this time had the kind of inverse effect compared to the Nuggets. I guess that's for a reason. I mean, they would rip off 3 straight wins to open things up against the Jazz, the Thunder, and the Warriors, winning all those games by at least 10. But I suppose in the rest of these games, they would just rest their starters and drop the last 3. There could have also been a few injuries that some players were dealing with and just trying to get themselves shored up prior to the beginning of the postseason. They have no idea who they're going to play right now. But all I can say is that they've just got to try and prepare as best as they can. Though, honestly, with being as young as they are, they're just going to have to try to impose physicality and grit in some way, because in terms of experience, they're just always going to be at a disadvantage. I don't think it really matters who the hell they face. I mean, let's just magically say, like, depending on the teams in the play-in. I don't know if you get a matchup like the 10 or 9 seed in the, I would say the 10 seed in the, well, no, the 9 seed in the Western Conference right now. I mean, you could argue that some of their players, as good as they can be, don't necessarily have enough playoff experience or enough of a playoff resume to match up with the Rockets, even with them being a little older as an overall team. But I don't know. Most teams that they are potentially set to face, depending on how things shape up, have an advantage in that front. Moving on to the Pacers, who went 6-1 during this time. They ripped off 5 straight wins against the Hornets on the second, against the Jazz by 28 on the fourth, against the Nuggets by 5, as I mentioned, against the Wizards by 6 this time. Not even comparable to the dominant, and I mean dominant, outing that they had the last time they faced off against them. And they capped things off with a win against the Cavaliers in a game that I watched on April 10th. This man, Tyrese Halliburton, was going crazy. There was one sequence in like the third quarter, I believe. This man just takes a screen, then proceeds to step back all the way into the rear of the fucking corner and hit a step back 3 over DeAndre Hunter at the buzzer. It was just that kind of game for him, which saw him put up 23 points and 10 assists with 8 rebounds, along with 3 blocks on 8 of 16 shooting, along with 4 threes. The Pacers were down by a tremendous amount, but once more, they did rip off a pretty sustainable run to take back control in the game. And ultimately, Tyrese Halliburton would seal things up for the 114-112 win. Their only loss would come to the Magic by 14. And then as they would sit a great portion of their starters in this rematch against the Pacers against the Cavs on April 13th. Once more in this game that I mentioned, the Cavs went outside despite having some pretty interesting performances. The Pacers also had some interesting performances of their own. You had a guy in Quentin Jackson coming off of the bench and putting up 21 points and 6 rebounds, along with 2 assists and 4 steals, with just a single turnover in 40 minutes of play, and on 7 of 16 shooting without hitting a 3. The rookie Johnny Furphy would put up 15 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists off the bench as well. Ray J. Dennis would have 13 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists. And Tony Bradley, who has been around for quite some time, had 14 points, 14 rebounds, 1 assist, and 5 blocks in 27 minutes of play off the bench. So a lot of weirdness going on. The only player that got a substantial amount of playing time was Jarris Walker. I mean, they did have Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, Miles Turner, and Obi Toppin appear in the game, but not for long enough to really, contribute much of anything. So that's a strong victory for the Pacers headed into the postseason. And they also very much like their matchup. I guarantee. Let's just say that when we talk about the Clippers, they are coming in hot. Let's just put it like that. They, including this stretch that I'm talking about, they have been on an 8-game winning streak heading into the postseason, as they would tie with the Nuggets with a 15-32 record and get the 5th seed in the conference. As I mentioned, they officially clinched it with the win against Golden State on the 13th, but it is well deserved if you account for everything that they've been through this season. I mean, quite literally, you don't have Kawhi Leonard even appear for most of the first half of this regular season. You have James Harden and Norm Powell doing their best to hold down the fort, along with strong contributions from, once more, a career year from Ivica Zubac. Then you get Kawhi Leonard coming back in, ingratiating himself into the offensive scheme, and all of a sudden he's hit his stride. I mean, there was a stat in the game that they stated that Kawhi had been tying his career-long streak of 17 straight games with more than 20. With the way he's played in the greatest of moments, one would believe he'd have a much longer streak than that of 20-point ball games. There could be a multitude of reasons for why that seems so short. But I don't know. Nevertheless, the Clippers, if they can manage to retain this chemistry, anything is really on the table for them. But it always comes down to health. And also, you want to see a fully healthy Kawhi Leonard, sure. But even with James Harden's recent performances, you also want to see if that's truly sustainable or not come the postseason. So all of that is going to be put to the test. Moving on to the Lakers, who went 4-3 during this time. They also tied with the Clippers and the Nuggets with a 50-32 record to close out the regular season. But I suppose with tiebreakers, they would get the 3rd seed in the West. They would lose to the Warriors, as I mentioned, and then scored back-to-back wins against the Pelicans and the Thunder by 27 in a game that saw Luka Doncic put up 30 points and 7 rebounds. They would then lose their back-to-back game against the Thunder in Oklahoma City in a game that was close throughout the early fourth quarter before, for a very phantom reason albeit, Luka Doncic got ejected from the ball game due to talking shit to a fan. Referee in the moment probably believed that he was directing his attention over there, and it just got really fucking weird. They eventually rescinded that technical foul. It was like, my goodness, you just have gotta get better at that. Then in the game against the Mavericks that I mentioned, it was just Luka's time to dominate the fucking game. He put up 45 points, 6 assists, 4 steals, 8 rebounds on 16 of 28 shooting and 7 of 10 shooting from deep. He was just hitting step back 3 after step back 3, getting over to the rim, drawing as many fouls as imaginable because absolutely no one could stop him. And all of this madness was part of a Lakers run that eventually saw them go on a 25-8 streak. With the win, obviously, Luka Doncic had to feel a very, very great sense of, triumph. I mean, honestly. Like, these niggas literally got him out of there, packed his ass up, and he came back and did that. Despite him being as emotional as ever during the video tribute that they had. At least they took it upon themselves to not blur his fucking image out. And his frame out of the goddamn sequences. At least that. They let it play on and gave it its due, which I guess I can get behind. Luka would also become the very first player since Will Chamberlain to score 45 points with against their team in the same regular season. As you know, I suppose the Lakers could do fine for themselves, and I mean, when you really break it down, you break it down, they've got a relatively fair shot, of course. Moving on to the Grizzlies, who have been 4-2 over the stretch. So I guess that's solid, but it still wasn't enough for them to avoid the play-in, because their first 3 wins came against the Heat, the Pistons, and the Hornets, before losing important matches to the Timberwolves and the Nuggets. If they would have at least won the game against the Timberwolves this time, I don't think they had the season series. But to just steal a game and make things tougher on the Grizzlies, or the Timberwolves, forcing them into a potential playoffs play-in spot, that would have certainly helped their cause. Now they would have to face a team that could be more formidable than that. And then against the Nuggets, they just collapsed yet again, before winning by 35 against the Dallas Mavericks team, really just sitting most of their core players. I mean, you had just a lot of randomness going on. Lamar Stevens literally went off for 31.6 rebounds and 3 assists on 14 of 25 shooting. Then Marvin Bagley, who was somehow still in the league, came off the bench, and, well, not even off the bench, but would put up 25 points and 12 rebounds. Then you had Vince Williams Jr. put up 12 points and 11 rebounds. Then you had Cam Spencer put up 23 points and 7 assists without a single turnover on 8 of 19 shooting. Like, yes, that ending, ultimately, you want to close out the season with wins. At the same time, again, you're just in the struggle. And honestly, it makes sense with you moving on from Taylor Jenkins so fucking late in the regular season. Because, I kid you not, since that point, everything has just hit the fucking fan. Like, the team doesn't even really seem to be really focused on just the basketball aspect of it, because with all what John Morant's been doing with these variations of these different celebrations, now that's been all the rage. And it just takes away from the focus on the path that you have to take in order to try and contend as an NBA team. Like, it's trivial in nature, potentially, but at the same time, when it's just circulating that much, it does not help the team's cause. But again, with them being the 8th seed in the Western Conference, they have at least 2 chances for themselves. That's all they're going to get. They need to make the most of them. Moving on to the Heat, who went 3-4 in this time. They did score a very solid win, one of their better wins of the season, against the Celtics by 21 on April 2nd, with Tyler Hero putting up 25 points, 6 rebounds, and 9 assists. A game that saw Celtics starters play. They weren't resting. They were going at it. And he had help, too. For one of the first times in a while. Obviously, Bam Adebayo putting up 21 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 rebounds and 6 assists. You also had Pelle Larsson, a rookie, come in and put up 16 points on 4 of 9 shooting with 2 threes and 4 assists and rebounds. That certainly got them going. Now, they would end up losing back-to-back ball games, including this one that I watched on April 3rd against the Grizzlies. Final score of 110 to 108. In yet another just barn burner that saw the Heat give it their very best. I mean, you had Tyler Hero put up 35 points in this one this time on total 23 shooting with 4 threes. You have Bam Adebayo put up 26 points, rather on 26 shots, not necessarily the most efficient. Same for Kelly Ware, despite putting up 13 points and 15 rebounds, along with 3 blocks. You can argue shooting 13 shots to get to 13 points is also not necessarily the best. But in any event, the Heat did, late in the fourth quarter, rally themselves back to ultimately take a lead on a Tyler Hero, or at least not the ball game, on a Tyler Hero layup. And then Ja Morant decided to clutch it up with a fadeaway jumper on none other than Kelly Ware at the very end of the ball game to seal it up. So that was definitely a very competitive one. They would then lose again to the Bucks by 6. They lost to the set. Well, they won against the 76ers by 12. Again, it saw Duncan Robinson put up 21 points. And you also would see Kelly Ware grab 17 rebounds and score 19 points while shooting 8 of 16 from the field. Duncan Robinson also needed just 8 shots to reach those 21 points. Hyper efficient ball game. You also had Pelle Lawson and Davion Mitchell put up 12 points each. Alec Burks also gave them a spark with 11 points in just 15 minutes. Might have gotten hurt, so that would explain that. They lost to the Bulls by 8 and then won against the Pelicans, putting up what I believe is their highest point total of the season with 153, yes, against a trash Pelicans team. But it would serve as their last win of the regular season, as they would then drop their matchup to the Wizards in a game that, once more, they keep struggling with this. Yet another match that saw them bring it down to the wire in a game that they didn't really have all of their starters in. Jaime Jaquez Jr. gave them a 41-point, 10 rebound, and 7 assist outing in 41 minutes of play and on 17 of 25 shooting. You had Josh Christopher get some burn for the first time in quite a while, and he, alongside rookie Keyshawn Johnson and Kelly Ware, would put up 17. Well, Keyshawn Johnson and Christopher would put up 17 points. Kelly Ware would contribute 13. Still, they have the lead late in the ball game. And once more, yet another player would hit another buzzer beater over them to close out the game and, by and large, the season. This time it was Carlton Carrington. They would lose by just a single point. The Heat, do they deserve to be here? They deserve a shot, I suppose, given how much turmoil this roster had to go through with the Jimmy Butler situation. They deserve that. Their fans deserve that. At the same time, they just need to win these games outright. Especially if this stretch of time truly represents all of what they've been through this season. They will win games in the most commanding of ways, and then there will just be so many losses that come down to the wire. Clearly, they are not a roster that can take that on. And with the Heat being the 10 seed, they have to put it all on the line. I kid you not. Because you need to win 2 games. You only are well, you would have to win 2 games to get in the postseason. And losing just one would effectively knock you out. So they need to play with urgency, especially in those late moments, if they want to finally get past that and just win. Win a game in clutch time. It just cannot, damn, yes, sometimes things just shape up in a specific way, and there's not much you can do about it. At the same time, I mean, damn, even the worst teams in the clutch get lucky every now and then. So, come on, man. The Bucks would go undefeated over this stretch in 7 games, as Giannis would just take it upon himself to go absolutely crazy. Yes, they were still dealing with the Giannis injury. Well, we're still dealing with the injury to Damian Lillard, but Giannis, on the other hand, would go for 3 straight triple-doubles before his season was up, and a good amount of these wins were pretty strong. I mean, a 13-point win against the 76ers, a 25-point win against the Pelicans, and then again, back-to-back wins against the Pistons team that is now in playoff contention, with one coming with the starters being in and another coming in with a bench being in. Like that's a testament to where they are. And as far as this game goes for the Bucks side, immediately you got both Pat Connaughton and Kyle Kuzma going for them. Kuzma would finish the game with 22 points on 8 of 10 shooting with 5 threes. Pat Connaughton would have what I would consider a career night for himself. 43 points, 11 rebounds, and 5 assists in 44 minutes of play on 16 of 29 shooting, along with 5 threes himself. Former Cav Pete Nance would also put up 5 threes and 19 points. Jamari Bouye would put up 15 points, 7 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks, and 3 rebounds on 5 of 10 shooting. Rookie Tyler Smith would put up 20 points on 6 of 9 shooting with 4 threes as well. It's also a matter of health for this team. I don't necessarily know what the situation on Damian Lillard looks like. They were stating that they would try him again in 7 to 10 days or so. So we're probably coming up on that period of time. Now, they just need to try to get him healthy. Because yes, while Giannis has proven that he can get it done with just him, there's clearly a lot that has to fall into motion for that to take place. It's not necessarily the preferred way to go. If you can get Damian Lillard back, you would like to have him back if you're the Bucks. I don't think that's a secret at all. You want to get that done. All right. Moving on to the Timberwolves, who went 5-1 during this time. They secured multiple wins against the Nets, and one of them came with Rudy Gobert, for whatever reason, putting up 35 points and 11 rebounds. Definitely not something that a Timberwolves fan should be expecting come playoff time. And I suppose you'll take it if you can. And, I mean, again, the Nets are not a good basketball team. That was relatively easy. They would also get another win against the 76ers here in a game that saw Anthony Edwards put up 37 points on the night and also shot 12 of 21 from the field with 6 threes. Rudy Gobert had 23 points and 19 rebounds as well. Those two just carried the weight. Then they suffered the loss to the Bucks, as I just mentioned. They beat the Grizzlies by 16 in a game that I watched and saw as Anthony Edwards would just catch fire over the course of the game, putting up 44 points, dropping 7 threes as well, and also shooting 13 of 19 from the field. Not to be outdone, though, you would have Julius Randle actually have one of the better games of his tenure with the Timberwolves, if we're being completely honest. A 31-point night that saw him shoot 5 of 10 from deep and shoot 13 of 22 from the field. No, he did not attempt a single shot from the foul line either. So to do all that without having to try and foul bait people, that goes a long way. More so than you might think. They would also close out their season with a win against the Jazz, relatively easy, on the 13th. So Anthony Edwards put up 43 points. Obviously, they were going to try to take this game as seriously as they could because they were in the play-in. But with the Warriors' loss, they were able to usurp them and clinch the 6th seed in the West. I guess they're going to be thanking the Clippers for that. Moving on to the Pelicans, who finished their season with a 21-61 record, finishing as the 14th seed in the West, and having not won a single game in April. And in most of these games, they weren't even fucking close. They weren't even close. 16-point losses in back-to-back ball games against both of the LA squads. They did manage to get within 4 against the Bucks and within 5 against the Nets. Still lost those. And then playing against the Bucks again, they lost by 25. They lost by 49 to the Heat. In a game that actually saw former Heat player Jamal Cain lead the way. But again, if that's happening, you're in trouble. And then they lost by 15 to none other than the Thunder. It's just, it's just disgusting. They have got a long way to go, and they have multiple things to figure out this offseason. Like, the very end of the season would also see them just start that. I mean, they moved on from their president of basketball operations, or executive vice president of basketball operations, in David Griffin, who had been there for quite a long time, through seasons that you could argue were on par with this one. I guess they were just trying to have some patience with him, but they would see that things were just not going to get much better under him. And I guess getting on here, there was also a report that just stated that to replace David Griffin, they were looking into Joe Dumars, who does already work in the NBA space. So I guess it wouldn't be too hard of a transition. But, you know, we'll see what happens with that situation. Pelicans just, yeah, they gotta retool, because keeping this roster as it is, they've just reached the end of the lifespan on it. I would think they cannot continue to settle for this. There have to be some improvements to be made elsewhere. That's just my purview on that. Moving on to the Knicks, who went 3-4 over the time span. They lost multiple games to the Cavs. And I definitely watched the first one play out. They lost by 19 in that ball game. They didn't even stand a chance. It is just utterly ridiculous. Alright. Then they would rip off back-to-back wins against the Hawks and the Suns. Which isn't really that hard to do. They lost to the Celtics in overtime. You want to know why? Mikal Bridges. Like, they're in the thick of overtime, down by a single possession with a chance to take a lead. And this man, Mikal Bridges, gets the pocket pass from Karl Anthony Towns and has it bounce off his fucking head out of bounds to effectively lose the Knicks the ball game. It's just like, yes, they did have a very good chance. Their stars performed. You had Karl Anthony Towns put up 34 points and 14 rebounds, shooting 14 to 21 from the field. You had Jalen Brunson put up 27 points and 10 assists on 10 to 21 shooting. You had some of your bench players stepping up and hitting some huge shots to keep you in it. And even with that, it's just always something with this team against the top 3 competition in the league. They would finish this season, the Knicks, with not winning a single game against any of the top 3 teams in the league. And it would only get worse from there, because the very next game would see them drop to the Pistons by 9, as I mentioned earlier on the video. What I failed to mention about that is that would give the Pistons the season sweep over the Knicks. So not only have you failed to beat the best of the best competition in each conference, but you failed to beat the up-and-coming Detroit team. And given the first round matchup that they're going to have, that I will get into a little later on, it's just not, it's not good. It's not good. They would then lose to the Cavs by 6, clinching that, and then they beat the Nets by 8. Again, even with their bench players being in. It's the Nets. It's not necessarily an impressive win. But with that, they would clinch the 3rd seed. I just don't know about their chances, man. It's hard for me to say right now, because they have the talent, clearly. But I don't know. From the fears of the loss of attrition, yet again, because Tom Thibodeau has been consistent in his game plan to play the hell out of the fucking starters. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that come into fruition yet again. Back-to-back postseasons. That would be terribly unfortunate for them. Man, they gotta figure it out, man. I don't know what to say. Moving on to the Thunder, who went 5-2 during this time to clinch a 68-14 record. By far the best team in the league, and one of the better teams in NBA history in multiple metrics. They had one of the highest, if not the highest, margins of victory for any team in NBA history as well. And that would reign true here. I mean, apart from their losses, which were relatively bad, they won all their games by scores of, margins of victory of 16 against the Pistons to open things up. And then they ripped off 4 straight wins to close off the season with wins by 16, 13, 34, and 15. Now, granted, down the backstretch, I mean, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would appear in the back-to-back pseudo series against the Lakers and drop a 42-point game. But outside of that, every one of their starters or core players really decided to lay off. So some of the minutes for these players decreased, and ultimately some of them took a rest. Some of them also might have gotten injured a little bit, but they were minor. Figured that it would be best to just take some time out and get healthy, because they're very, very much playoff bound. Like, they already sealed up a damn spot fucking months ago. Pretty much a month ago to this point. Even dating back damn near 2 months ago. That's how great of a team that they have been. But again, despite all this regular season success, they are also another team that is very young and inexperienced when it comes to playoff basketball. I mean, yes, they got to the second round last season. Yeah, in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's first season, they faced off against the Rockets in the first round and lost out there. Yeah, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was actually a part of the Clippers roster in 2019 that gave the Warriors hell in the first round also. But there's not too much to speak of there. And then outside of Shai and I guess Dortch for that matter, I mean, I guess Hartenstein offers some. Jalen Williams and Chet Holmgren are obviously young players. Isaiah Joe hasn't been involved in anything like this. Cason Wallace is very young. And then not to mention, I mean, Alex Caruso is definitely, he hasn't necessarily gotten the craziest amount of repetition in terms of years and years of playoff experience. But as a part of the Lakers, he obviously made the NBA championship, NBA Finals, and won it with that squad. I guess they're going to have to lean heavily on him for, like, advice and expertise on how to carry themselves. They're going to need it. A good majority of them. Moving on to the Magic, who over the course of this time went 4-1. They would finish with an even 41-41 record, clinching the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference and a playoff berth. Will play in berth. Jeez, let me rephrase that. They haven't done that yet. They gotta go handle their business. But credit to them. I mean, they are still reeling from some of their injuries earlier on in the season, like the loss of Jalen Suggs. That's still fucking them up. But they have reclaimed some of their defensive prowess, despite all of this. Their offense is still shit. They can't shoot. So I just don't know, especially if they get a draw against a team that is offensive-minded to oblivion, I can't see them being able to last all that much because they are truly streaky shooters, if we want to be serious here. They're very streaky. When they do not get their shots to fall and they get into a funk, you can sense exactly how bad things are going to get every time. But as far as this stretch went, they beat the Wizards by 12. They beat the Hawks 119-112 with Paolo Banchero putting up 33 points in back-to-back ball games. They beat the shit out of the Celtics, as I mentioned, though again, the Celtics just didn't really care enough to play anyone important outside of Peyton Pritchard. They then lost to the Pacers by 14, as I mentioned, and then lost to the Hawks to close out the season, despite Anthony Black putting up 20 points and 10 rebounds. All right. Moving on to the 76ers, who would finish as the 13th seed in the Eastern Conference with a 24-58 record. Over the course of this stretch, they went 1-5, with their only win coming against the Wizards, because of course in a game that saw Jeff Dalton Jr. for whatever fucking reason decide to put up 30 points and just 4 steals as well, even on 11 of 15 shooting and 4 threes off the bench. Also, Lonnie Walker IV had 24 points, just pure buckets on 7 of 17 shooting. And Adem Bona and Quentin Grimes had 17 points each in this one in their 19-point victory. Adem Bona would also have another solid game against the Bucks earlier on in this stretch, but that was won up by Giannis Antetokounmpo triple-double in a game that I mentioned earlier on in the video. He lost by 5 to the Timberwolves and by 12 to the Heat, before losing back-to-back ball games against the Hawks, and then the Bulls, despite Lonnie Walker the fourth putting up 31 points to close out their season. It's not going to be a great offseason for them. I mean, they spent the tail end of it last year hyping up this team, this core, to be championship contenders and championship caliber, when that did not even come close to being the case at all. And now you're allocating all of this money over to these people. You really are, like, just fucked all around. Like, you've got to naturally, if you are the 76ers, putting yourselves in this spot, that's too much money. And if you try to trade these people, you're likely going to be treading very closely to the threshold of the second apron, and you don't even want to cross it because you would get penalized completely. You probably have to run it back. You have to give this another shot. But how reliable do they really think that this will be? I don't know. Just a terrible situation all around. But still, while the 76ers disappointed and had a worse record, you can argue that the Suns are as far as the future outlook goes, the Suns are they're fucked. They are absolutely fucking screwed. I mean, oh my gosh. During this stretch, they went 1-5. They just got boat raced in most of these ball games. A 20-point loss to the Celtics, despite Devin Booker doing all that he could, really. 37 points for him, and that still wasn't enough. Lost by 14 to the Knicks, despite Devin Booker putting up 40. The aforementioned loss to the Warriors by 38 goddamn points. Then a pair of other bad losses to the Thunder and Kings. In between that was a win against the Spurs, but let's be honest, they were dealing with so many injuries, so naturally they're a depleted roster. I'm not even gonna give that any praise. But the Suns, through and through this entire season, were just fucking terrible. They couldn't play defense to save their lives, and in every instance where their offense went cold for just the slightest amount of time, they were as good as done. And sure enough, they got just close to the play-in. They had it, and they still couldn't retain that. But you had championship aspirations as well. For a team consisting of 3 quote-unquote good to great basketball players. And you would naturally think, at least if you're living in the past, that they would just dominate. But in reality, that big 3 did not mesh together well at all. At all. At fucking all. They did not. And then, not to mention, all of the pieces around them were just suspicious as hell. I mean, again, this is no disrespect to Nick Richards, poor Nick Richards, but that had to be your best get in the trade deadline. You had no other choice because no other team wanted to make a move on any of your other players at that moment. That says a lot. That says a whole hell of a lot, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, that's just craziness, man. And as a result of that, the Suns would have to turn somewhere. You know, sure, the players and I guess the next best place to turn to was coaching. They would decide to fire Mike Budenholzer. I guess we could really see it coming from a mile away. But even with the firing of him, they didn't inherently solve the problem. You see, now, yes, was the defense coached under Michael Budenholzer bad for the Suns? Yes. That being said, he's not even a bad defensive coach. He's a smarter offensive mind. He's a really good defensive coach. I'm not going to act like he was on the same plane as Frank Vogel. But he currently got the job done. He brought in championship expertise. So you thought you had the guy. And ultimately, in his position, yes, he did have some questionable things go down, but there is only so much he can do when the personnel isn't on par. And why was the personnel not on par? Well, that is because of none other than Matt Ishbia. I mean, literally, from the very second he has gotten in Phoenix, he's done nothing but spam trade after trade after trade to try and, I guess, just accelerate the process of building a championship contender. And it's literally hindered their future outlook. It has cap-strapped them in the present day. And not a lot of people are going to be able to take this shit anymore. Like, we are talking about potentially playing around with crossing the second apron. So you believe that having 3 different players on one roster sign max to supermax level contracts ranging in the triple digits is wise for your ability to not only maintain a legitimate roster but also pick up truly fresh talent that you would legitimately be able to deploy in different schemes and have things work out exceptionally well. There's no way they could have believed that, because with all of that being done so damn quickly, they had to just settle for the scraps. I don't know what it is with the Suns, but they got to get it figured out, man. Because it's just not necessarily something you can look at the players at. And the coaching as well is not inherent. It's not naturally a problem. I mean, like, sure, all of these head coaches had their flaws, but let's face it, Monty Williams is on the path to getting a championship with this damn team in 2021, and then you move on from him. You pick up Frank Vogel last season and fire him at the end, and then you hire Mike Budenholzer and fire him. Like, all that changing around of different schemes and things like that, you can't really expect every player to come along well in that situation. You just can't. It's asinine. How would any one person be able to really take all of that in? Like, it's just crazy. I mean, I don't know. I truly don't know what is going to be next. Because, let's be honest, We all know why Ishbia got there in the first place. It's very clear that as an owner, Robert Sarver really just did everything in his power to be as big of a dickhead as possible. We know this about Robert Sarver. There's a reason why his ass is gone and was forced to sell the team to new ownership. We get that. But Matt Ishbia, in his fatal flaw, is just being so damn impulsive. What the hell is their next owner bound to do? What is their next owner going to be involved in at this point? That's really what we have to ask ourselves. Because the Suns, let's be honest, with all of their draft capital gone up until the early 2030s, pretty much, if they continue on this path. Because some of these picks that they traded away to other teams have protections placed on them. But the thing is, they are going to actively work against the Suns and juice up this capital for the other teams involved, the Nets and Knicks of the world. They're literally going to juice them up. It is just, it's bad all around. The Rockets as well. Just all right. Moving on to the Trailblazers, who over this stretch of time went 3-3. They won against the Raptors on the third with Shaedon Sharpe putting up 36 points, and then lost to the Bulls on the back-to-back despite Deni Avdija putting up 37 points, 5 assists, and 11 rebounds with a single turnover on a total of 25 shooting. Some inefficient shooting from both Delano Banton and Shaedon Sharpe might have hurt them a little bit. Likewise for Donovan Clingan. You can't be as tall as he is going for just 7 points on 3 of 11 shooting. He did grab 18 rebounds, though. Then, in their next game, they would win against the Spurs by 11, with Tamani Kamara, their defensive stopper, leading the way for them with 23 points and 10 assists, 10 rebounds. They played against the Jazz and lost in overtime despite Shaedon Sharpe putting up a career-high 7 points. They lost to the Warriors by 17, as I mentioned, and then closed out the season with a win against a Lakers team that quite literally started Bronny James for, count it, 38 minutes. Yeah, I really should have talked about this game, I guess, a little more when I was talking about the Lakers. But, yeah, it was a dud for Bronny James Jr. Oh, yeah, this is a shot to prove something. He proved absolutely nothing. Like, they were so ready to clamp this man up from the first fucking possession. I kid you not. Once I saw, obvious, I guess I had to see it in post. This wasn't nationally televised. But once I saw that they put Tamani Kamara on Bronny James, I knew it was going to be a wrap from there. That was just so fucked up. It's like, damn. Like, yes, if you're the Blazers, you want to finish off the season strong, and you want to give it the best you have, but damn, that's so crazy. Like, they recognize, they feel as though he is no threat, and yet they're going to do everything in their power to treat him as if he really is, and just expose the hell out of him. That's definitely crazy. But, you know, I guess a strong way to close out the season for them. They also got very, very close to getting into the play-in. But they're also a team that in time can't continue relying on just settling for it. year in, year out. They're going to have to take that next step at some point. We just got to see when exactly that will happen for them. Moving on to the Kings, who went 4-3 over this time. They got suffered a loss against the Wizards to open things up, and then ripped off 3 straight wins against the Hornets, Cavs, and Pistons, before losing to the Nuggets by 8, losing to the Clippers by 1, and then beating the Suns to close out the season by 11, with a final score of 109-98. Moving on to the Spurs, who went 3-4 over this time. They would win against the Nuggets with a final score of 113-106. They then lost their next 3 ball games against the Cavs by a single point, against the Blazers by 11, as I mentioned, and then against the Clippers by 5, as I mentioned as well. They also beat the Warriors in just wild fashion, as I stated at that time. There's just no way that shot should have went in. It did. Nothing that can really be done about it at this particular point in time. They would lose to the Suns by 19, as I mentioned, and then close things out against the Raptors, the win by a final score of 125-118, with Keldon Johnson putting up 23 points and 9 assists. Moving on to the Raptors, who went 2-4 during this stretch. They had just on and off streaks of two straight losses to open things up against the Blazers and against the Pistons in a back-to-back. Then a couple straight wins against the Nets and Hornets on April 6th and April 9th, with players like Jared Rhoden and Jonathan Mobo stepping up for them in some of the wildest ways imaginable. Also, Jamal Shead was getting burned as well. You will had them then close out the season with back-to-back losses against the Mavericks and Spurs, teams from the Western Conference Southwest Division. Despite Scotty Barnes putting it all on the line in his last one, they still lose. That has also been a microcosm of their season, which saw them finish as a 30-52 ball club, somehow being the 11th seed in the Eastern Conference. No wonder people say it's top heavy. That is just ridiculous. That is crazy. There is no shot that a legitimately, if things went a certain way, you could have had a 50-plus loss team in the play-in. And honestly, if something like that were ever to happen, let's just say that they would seriously reconsider having the play-in as a part of the postseason format. Because there's no, at that point, man, that is just a layup for any team they face. Like, you're literally just lying down and taking loss after loss, and yet somehow you get a shot at another game. No, that would be crazy. The Jazz would go 1-5 over this stretch, finishing as by far the worst team in the Western Conference, only getting their win against the Blazers in a game that did see Kyle Filipowski go crazy. He had 30 points and 18 rebounds on this night to go along with 5 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks on 13 of 17, shooting with 2 threes. Like I say, I guess with some of these other guys like Walker Kessler and even Lauri Markkanen literally not playing for the rest of the season, I guess with their injuries they can't necessarily be blamed, but to see Kyle Filipowski get that chance and put up these kinds of numbers, if he continues to get reps, he could assert himself as a potential starter. I was saying anyways, when they drafted him to have a lineup of Larry Markkinen at small forward, Kyle Filipowski at power forward, and then Walker Kessler at center, that would be pretty crazy stuff. Obviously, I would have to account for a guy like John Collins. I don't even know what they're going to do with him anymore. It's like I thought they were getting a fucking steal by picking up John Collins away from the Hawks, man. It just hasn't worked out. It just hasn't. I have to be completely honest. It has not gone the way that either party really expected at this point. So they might move on from him. I wouldn't be surprised if they just decided to let it go, because I can't really see them getting as much out of him anymore. I just don't know. And then for the Wizards, they would finish their season with an 18-64 record, by far the worst team in the Eastern Conference. And over this stretch of time, they would go 2-5. At least they closed off the season with a win, as I mentioned earlier on in the video, with a Carlton Carrington buzzer beater. Apparently he played all 82 games in his rookie season. And, to go through that grind despite being a part of just a truly terrible team, to go out like that, you have to appreciate that, generally speaking. He also opened things up with a win against the Kings by 5 before dropping their next 5 in a row. And outside of the Pacers game, none of them were close at all, as I mentioned earlier on in the video. At least the Wizards, though, could have a prime chance to rebuild effectively. They have all the draft capital they would need. They have a great shot at the number 1 overall pick, and if things go according to plan and the main man in Cooper Flagg is ready to enter the draft and he gets selected number 1 by them, they have a hole to fill. You could have Flagg take over the true power forward position, I guess. Maybe small forward even. I guess you want to just give it to Alex Saul, because his physical, I'm not going to say limitations, but I guess he's deficient to the point where you would still prefer him playing at the 4 instead of the 5. Either way, they have the capacity to take him on. So they could find themselves in a good place. But that does do it as far as the regular season action goes. So I guess here I will briefly just check out, give some insight into how some of these play-in and play-in games and playoff series could shape up. So we'll just start out with the playoff series a little bit, and then end off with the play-in games. We'll do the Eastern Conference first. So to start out with the 4-5 matchup, you would have the Pacers facing off against the Bucks in the first round yet again. Obviously, the Pacers beat them in 6 games last postseason, with both Giannis and Damian Lillard missing time in different portions of the series. And the Pacers were able to take full advantage of that. Obviously, we also remember in one of those games, I believe Patrick Beverley just got himself in like a complete and total mess, throwing a fucking ball at a woman on the sideline. And then there was a whole buzz about that. Yeah, that happened in that series. But as far as this year's goes, they did already say that Damian Lillard earlier on would miss the start of this series. They ruled him out for the first game, and I would have to imagine that they would have him be out for the next game as well. The Pacers did secure home court advantage with their win against the Cavs as well. And they, like I said, they were down in that game fighting for their lives. They ended up being successful in that. And like last year, I think that does offer them a huge advantage, of course. You already have a depleted roster, so I guess morale might be down just a little bit. You're riding high as an overall team, and you're playing in front of your Indiana fan base. They're definitely going to turn things up a notch. They're already one of the best teams, or one of the fastest teams in the leagues in terms of pace. Expect that to increase. Obviously, they would have to retain their efficiency. And they've got to certainly try to hunker down on defense. Now, obviously, by himself, Giannis is a tough task. A damn near impossible task for any team. So you're going to have multiple defenders take him on. Probably as soon as he gets in the post. Or if he's bringing the ball up the court even. I guess not. It's not even like he can shoot, but to have one defender on him at the top of the key before he gets into a full gear and shifts into a crazy drastic turn of just blistering speed and bruising power, barreling down the fucking lane in the paint for an easy layup or dunk. You don't want to put yourself in that situation. You just don't. Like, you want to try to take as much control of this series as possible. You don't want to keep on getting yourself in barn burners with this squad. And obviously that would mean that you have to do a great job of staying attached to their shooters as well. Don't let AJ Green just pull out some random shit on you, I guess. But again, if you are the Bucks, and let's say that the hope is that you get Damian Lillard back for this series, you cannot, under any circumstance, in a perfect world, they would probably get Damian Lillard back in game 3 or 4. But you cannot, under any circumstance, return to Milwaukee and get Damian Lillard back down 0-2. You can't do it. You cannot afford it. You will not. You will not win the series that way. You have to try and steal a game in Indiana. Give yourself a chance to even the series before it gets back to Milwaukee. Maybe you get Damian Lillard back and you can play on a minutes restriction and have things ramp up from there. You've got to give yourself a fighting chance, because I can guarantee you, if they go down 0-2 heading back to Wisconsin for game 3, with as great as the Indiana offense can be, they're going to take over everything. Like, that is just a huge tone setter for a team this young to enter into opponent territory, needing to just take at least a game from there. You don't want to give them that edge. You don't want to if you are the Bucks. I don't have any. I'm not even going to do any prediction, anything. I mean, I guess I could, but we'll just wait until all the series are set. I'm not going to do that right now. For the 3-6 matchup in the Eastern Conference, we have the Knicks and Pistons. Yeah, I'm not doing any predictions, but what I can tell you right now, it's not looking too promising for the Knicks. It's not. You already have lost the season series against this team. Now, yes, the Pistons are a young core with no experience. And yes, the Knicks have home court advantage and an edge in overall experience. I mean, they lost the war of attrition. They did get to the second round last year. Even with all of that being said, does home court advantage really mean anything if the Pistons beat you on their own home court and in Madison Square Garden multiple times this season? Does that really mean anything? Yes, obviously, playoff atmosphere ramps things up intensely. But I just would not necessarily say that there's an outright winner in this one. It'll certainly be interesting to watch. I would say that the Knicks, I don't know. If you are the Pistons, and this would entail Cade Cunningham to become more of a slasher, I guess, and be more efficient around the rim than he has been over the course of this season, you are certainly going to try to exploit the Cunningham versus, I suppose, Brunson matchup. Everything, and I mean everything, has to run through that. I guess the Knicks could try putting someone like Josh Hart on him instead. But in any case, if you are the Pistons, whoever Jalen Brunson is guarding on that particular possession, you are going to hunt him down. That has to be the game plan. And Karl Anthony Towns, too, for that matter. So, I guess, try to get Jalen Duren some touches from the post. Sure, a little pick and roll action as well. And you've just got to see what happens with that. But that's going to be the key. You have to get Jalen Brunson not only hunted on defense, but also wear him down. Because on the offensive end, you know that Jalen Brunson is going to try his absolute hardest to play a physical brand of basketball. For a person that stands at his stature, for him to be backing people down in the post like he does, and demoralize them in the fashion that he does, that could be a scary sight for the Pistons roster if they just let him have his way in that, because that opens up other shooters elsewhere. And that's going to be the key as well for both teams. Is Malik Beasley's three-point shooting as consistent as we have seen throughout the regular season? And for that matter, is Mikal Bridges on the other end going to step his game up when it counts? Because there was a stretch from, I guess, around one of the, I don't know, we were getting closer and closer out of, I guess, I guess I'm going to go out on a limb and say from mid-December to around the All-Star break, a little after that, it felt like Mikal Bridges found his shot again. Maybe I'm even shortening the span, but he was able to regain his efficiency from deep after the bullshit he was pulling off in the beginning of the regular season with that whack-ass jumper. And you want to know what Mikal Bridges decides to do during this time? For whatever reason, he reverted back to that jump shot, that clanky-ass jump shot, and his efficiency started tanking once again. So what version of Mikal Bridges are we going to see in this one? That's going to be heavily important. Obviously, Cat as well is going to have to bring it. And when you look at it as well, the Pistons honestly just have more depth. In multiple facets. I mean, they have more players that you could trust coming off the bench. I would say that the Knicks can really only look at Deuce McBride and I guess Precious Achiuwa occasionally. It's not consistent with either one of those guys. And then again, there's a reason for that, as I am about to state here. The Pistons are young enough to where they're willing to get fresh legs on the court whenever they need. No, they don't necessarily have a player who, outside of Kate Cunningham and I guess maybe Jalen Duren sometimes, who's able to just take over a game by themselves, but they have a really good collection of players who on any given night can find themselves going off and just play off of each other's strengths. I don't think that any individual player from the Knicks bench can really do that because they don't get the playing time necessary to build that up over an entire regular season. They just simply have not played enough. But yeah, when you look at wing defenders as well, I mean, it's really going to just be about how well you can play the chess match as well. I mean, for all the shit that he can cause on any given night as a top-tier instigator, Isaiah Stewart is a really fucking good wing defender and can occasionally, as I guess a small ball center, hold it down in the paint if he needs to. And Asar Thompson is also just a defensive force. That goes without saying, right? So I don't know. Again, that could be a bad matchup for the Knicks with someone as young and as explosive, as tenacious on the defensive end as Asar Thompson is. And you mean to tell me that these starting Knicks players who have logged so many minutes over the regular season, you're going to tell me that they're not going to be a little tired and potentially a little slower on the court with the ball in their hands? That's going to be lunchtime for a player like Asar Thompson. That's going to be lunchtime for a younger player like Ron Holland II, even if we want to get real deep into their bench players. So the Knicks have got a lot to figure out before then. They better just be glad that they got Jalen Brunson back, because oh my gosh, if they didn't have Jalen Brunson and they were in this spot, I don't know. I really could not tell you. All right, well that was a pretty long one, but no, like, you know, I just gotta be honest about it. All right, for the playoff matchups that are set in the Western Conference now, for the 4-5 matchup here, you have the Nuggets and the Clippers, and this one should be pretty fucking exciting. I'm not gonna lie to you. As long as everyone is healthy, you know, obviously, we have Kawhi Leonard just going in and out of playoff series most of these years over just the past half decade. You have had James Harden consistently tail off in overall production. In pretty much every single season he's been a core player of any team. Nikola Jokic is obviously just going, like, man, he's going to do what he does no matter what. Jamal Murray's health is still in question. I haven't heard anything outright and clear on what his status could be for the first game. I do know he's still dealing with injury. I suppose they're just trying to work him back in the best way they can. And then some of their other role players, like I guess they did just get Julian Strawther back, but they've got to make sure that they're intact as well. And that is at the core of where things stand for this matchup. On the one hand, role players for both teams are going to have to step up in important moments, and more often than not, we've seen it on the Clippers side. I mean, you've had Norm Powell doing it for the entire season, holding down the fort. Leonard not there. You had Kawhi Leonard holding down the fort. You had Norman Powell holding down the fort when Kawhi Leonard wasn't there for the entire season. Chris Dunn is, even as he's getting a little older, he's still been a pretty solid perimeter defensive presence. Bogdan Bogdanovic, since they've gotten him, he has rejuvenated himself. It took a little while, but he's had some really good stretches over these past few ball games with pretty efficient shot making off the bench. Derrick Jones Jr., explosive as ever. You already know what time it is with that. The Nuggets have some candidates as well, but it's never consistent. And honestly, these fleeting performances from role players for the Nuggets are just not sustainable enough for an entire series. They are going to need consistent production from players on the back burner. That is key. They cannot keep doing this. Sure, it would help, but it's not going to last you if you are seriously trying to make a run. So, while it's cute to see that Jalen Pickett had a few games in double digits, he's still not a consistent enough player to be relied on. And if he wants to reach that, he's going to have to hit a few shots in every game and be timely in each of them. Julian Strawther as well, honestly, is going to be one of the X factors for the Nuggets in this series, because though they do not space the floor a whole hell of a lot, what I can say is that when he has been in the lineup playing for them, it does feel like their volume has increased incrementally in games in which he's played. And they've kept that efficiency with him also stepping up to the plate and performing pretty damn well. They're going to need him just as well as they're going to need a guy like Aaron Gordon too, to continue what has been the best shooting season of his career so far as a 40% plus three-point shooter. Which is something that, again, I still could not fathom him reaching that as a member of the Magic. I couldn't fathom it at all. And Christian Braun is obviously a candidate for most improved player as well. I have no doubt that he'll do his best, but again, they're going to need more. Because it does seem that a guy in Nikola Jokic, who just became the very first center and the fifth NBA player ever the fifth the sixth instance of an NBA player averaging a triple-double in an entire regular season, because Oscar Robertson obviously did it, and then they said Russell Westbrook did it 4 fucking times. So, and then a 30-point triple-double on top of that. We know that Jokic is obviously going to get his, but man, when the going gets tough, and in those moments where the Clippers might get the upper hand on Nikola Jokic, somebody's got to be able to do something they aren't expecting, because they're watching the film. And honestly, an experienced coach in Tyronn Lue is going to try his hardest to get David Adelman off rhythm early and often. It's going to be on the execution, rather the executioners need to deviate at times if things go haywire. And they're going to have to do so as effectively as possible. Another interesting thing about this matchup here is that for something that has been pretty much damn near 4 years and some change in the making, going on 5 years, we are finally going to see what could happen if Ivica Zubac becomes the primary defender on Nikola Jokic. If you remember, in the 2020 bubble playoffs, second round between the Nuggets and the Clippers, ironically enough, there was just a terrible decision being made. Obviously, Doc Rivers was there. They had the lead, the 3-1 lead, but over the course of this time, he decided to have Montrezl Harrell guard Nikola Jokic for pretty much every single game of this series. And after game 4, even with Nikola Jokic producing, anyways, after game 4, Harrell just started getting exposed left and right. Nikola Jokic torched his ass. And that was partial. That was crucial in what ultimately ended up happening with them losing the series in 7 games and suffering one of the worst outcomes for a true championship contender. I mean, the Clippers had that label as soon as they got Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and they flopped it. In part because of that decision. Now, with Montrezl Harrell being far gone, you have Kawhi Leonard. Yes, Kawhi Leonard could take on that matchup, but at the same time, he's a little older. He's still a great two-way player, but do not know if you necessarily want that the entire time. And Paul George is there no more as well. Your next best option is Ivica Zubac then. And it feels to me like Tyronn Lue would give him the reins to take on that assignment. The first game is going to say a lot about how this series will go. It's going to say a lot. Immediately, going to be looking for how Zubac guards Jokic. And we're going to be looking for how both teams' role players show up to the plate. Because, again, as much as we know that Jokic is going to do what he can, and naturally he'll have some off nights, they are almost a guarantee for a guy like James Harden. Kawhi Leonard's on a hot streak, sure, but even he's been susceptible to having a few bad games in the playoffs, including some from the 2020 series, none worse than Game 7, where that man shot what? Like, like 6 of 22 or something. Just not a great game for Kawhi Leonard standards, especially at the time. Man, if you would have told a Raptors fan or something like that he would move on and that he was bound to perform like that in the playoffs after what the hell he did in 2019, they would blow a fucking gasket. Okay, that's besides the point. But we'll see. It should be a pretty good one. And then for the next series that is set here, 3-6. You have the Lakers facing off against the Timberwolves. I do believe that the Timberwolves can give the Lakers a little bit of fight with just Anthony Edwards alone. But yeah, the Lakers are just, I don't know. It's just, when you look at it, yes, Anthony Edwards has a capability, sure, but bro, the Lakers overmatched the Timberwolves in so many ways. I mean, I guess McDaniels could be considered a sort of stretch 3, stretch 4 at times. But it's like, I don't know. Obviously, his defense has been consistent, but offensively, he does still leave a little bit to be desired, to be honest with you. They're going to need him, but I just don't know if he can be relied on. That man was talking about Anthony Edwards in last first round playoff series last year against the Suns, talking about they have KD, we have Jaden McDaniels. They're not the same player at all. This is not going to be that kind of party here. The Lakers have a rotation of defensive-minded wings that they can put to clamp Jaden McDaniels down. Seriously. Same goes for Julius Randle. Though they're not going to have to go as hard on him because he's just not a playoff performer either. He never has been. I'm not, my hopes are not high for that at all. I don't expect any shift in that notion to take place. The real questions lie on the Timberwolves side here, if we're being honest. Obviously, the Lakers and their defense, they better make sure that, just get it together there. But offensively, I mean, yeah, Timberwolves' strength is defense as well. So the offense of the Lakers could give them problems because we know that Edwards is likely to take the Doncic assignment. And then for LeBron, you're probably going to have Jaden McDaniels guarding him. You're not going to put Julius Randle on him. He's going to bitch him. So who are you putting on Austin Reeves? This has been quite the point of debate on many of the shows, but it's honestly a pretty good question to ask. Who in this series is going to account for Austin Reeves if your best 2 defenders, especially on the perimeter, are accounting for those 2? Because we know what Austin Reeves, or any sort of guard who can be as dynamic with the basketball, we know what they are capable of doing to Rudy Gobert. We've seen it time and again. We saw it time and again last postseason with Luka Doncic just killing him time and again. Okay? So, you're not going to try to do that. Because you don't want to be in a spot like he was in last year where this man was fucking dancing around on the three-point line at the end of the goddamn ball game as Luka Doncic just hit the damn shot over him, made him look fucking silly. With Draymond Green fucking hate watching and laughing from fucking broadcast. Like, yeah, you don't want that. You don't want a repeat of that. So you're optimally for, I guess, just having a guard, another guard. Michael Conley Jr. is going to be the assignment on there against Austin Reeves. And generally speaking, again, there are just so many ways for them to attack the Timberwolves defense, as much as I just wouldn't like to admit this. Literally. Not only do you have the two of the smartest minds in the fucking league on one team, but they could run any offense, any style of offense against them, and it could work. Any style of offense. It is all at their disposal. They want to run a pick and roll game? Yes. Is Jackson Hayes exactly like a Derek Love II or Daniel Gafford? No. But he is dynamic, he is faster, and he is uber athletic. Rudy Gobert is not. If the passes are on time and Jackson Hayes is in some way expecting them, they're going to operate in those with LeBron or Luka. You want to get down in the paint and have shooters surrounding the perimeter? That can work. Because, again, if you have guys like LeBron, Luka, or Austin Reeves driving down in the paint, pretty much every single time, I'm telling you right now, they're attracting two defenders. Every single time. Someone is going to be open on the outside. The Timberwolves are just going to have to, in those situations, hope and pray that they miss. And that's what it's going to come down to for the Timberwolves as well. They have to win the advantage on the glass. Because, again, as slow-footed as their defense can be sometimes, especially with Rudy Gobert being this defensive anchor still, if we want to call him that, by having so many people crash the glass and potentially not being successful, these shooters can always rotate around to other spots and relocate, fire up another easy look for a make. And at that point, it's like, what do you do? So they're just, they are in for something if they do not get that together. I just gotta be very, very clear about that. But alright, those are all the playoff series. For the play-in games, the very first one tonight that I am bound to go and see in pretty much just around a half hour from now, you have the Magic facing off against the Hawks. Now again, as I said, the Hawks did end up closing out right, and they would finish with a win against them. They've just got to keep that same intensity. This, again, the loser of this game, they have at least another game offered to them. But if you are the Hawks, I think that given the 9-10 situation, you just want to try as hard as you can to win. Because, let's be honest, the Hawks, oh man, I think they are, again, they're a little lucky to be here with the fact that the Eastern Conference is top heavy. Every single one of these teams is lucky to be here, don't get it twisted, but yeah, they have got to get together. It does start by just offering Trae Young the help he needs. Literally. They're going to spam pick and rolls like you wouldn't believe. I need to see Onyeka Okongwu set very hard screens, especially in situations where Trae Young might be looking to shoot the 3 ball. Because yes, Trae Young does at times just he will, without a screen at times, just chuck up random shots and miss. But there are times where he'll genuinely seek it off of a screen. And in those cases, he won't get them sometimes because he's not physical enough to get the defense, especially if you are just going to press him. He's not that physical. Even with him being a skilled dribbler to potentially create space, you want to free him up as much as possible. Give him breathing room on every shot that he's looking for. Because if he's deterred in even the slightest of ways, and this is no joke, literally just the slightest of touches, he's not going to make it. Their wing shooters also have to be ready as well. Rizal Shea needs to be more consistent in this ball game. A 38-point outing against the Nets is fine, but that doesn't impress me. This is going to be his first real test. He is a young player, so I guess there's a little bit of grace there, but they're going to need him. Terrence Mann and Karis LeVert off the bench as well. They need to provide quality minutes. That's my outlook for this game. Because again, I kid you not, if you can bank on 3 teams in the Eastern Conference being in the play-in pretty much every single year since it's been around, since it's been introduced, the Hawks, the Bulls, and the Heat, every single time, almost every single fucking season. I kid you not. And the Bulls and the Heat are the 9-10 matchup. With the way that Josh Giddey and Kobe White have been playing, I feel like the Bulls have a pretty good shot to make a full run to the 8 seed. I believe so. The Heat, in this context, with having their full starters in, having a guy like Bam Adebayo and also Khalil Ware now becoming an important player on this Heat squad, emerging as one of their brighter spots in a season that has been filled with turmoil, as I mentioned. If the Bulls try to operate from the interior, those two could definitely cause problems with the logjam. But if they can get their shooting together on the perimeter, They're gonna have to try. Because it's just not going to be easy to impose your will in the paint in this ballgame. I can tell you that right now. They're going to have to operate from the mid-range. They're going to have to try to catch this Heat defense off balance. Because, that's the thing as well. It's like, you're going to have Andrew Wiggins in as well, I believe. I guess you would have him on Josh Giddey. You would have Davion Mitchell on Kobe White, probably. Yeah, again, I do not necessarily trust Nikola Vucevic to have an incredibly great ball game against Bam Adebayo or Khalil Ware. So again, their shooting is just going to have to be on point. And I'm looking specifically at Patrick Williams. It is a miracle that he's still with this team. They're going to need him to step his game up. It is way past due. It's about fucking time. They need him. I'm not saying this like he's the most important player on the squad, but by goodness, a lottery pick was spent on this man to be this quote-unquote two-way player. They had the nerve to call this man the Paul. Need to see a little bit of that tonight. Or else their ass is grass. They're done. But we'll see. Because again, no matter who wins this ball game, let's get very clear about something. If the Hawks lose to the Magic, the Hawks might also be as good as done. Do you know how badly Trae Young has struggled against both of these teams in postseason play? Do we need to take it back to, I believe, the 2022 playoff series that he had against the Heat? Do I need to do this? Let me do this shit. Hold on, bruh. Yeah, let me see. Hold on. Cause I like dead ass. This has got to be studied. Okay. Yes. I'm right. 2022 playoff series, first round against the Heat. Oh my god. This was just one of the collapses from a superstar in the past 5 years. My god. I kid you not, dude. Alright. In the 5-game series that they had against the Heat, this man Trae Young averaged just 15.4 points per game. 15.4 points per game. 6 assists. Less than, pretty much 0.5 steals per game. 18.4% shooting from deep. 31.9% from the field. And an average box plus minus of 11.6. So, not to mention, per game, he averaged 6.2 turnovers per game. So not only did he have around a 1 to higher than 1 assist to turnover ratio, not only did his points per game drop drastically when we got into this playoff series, but he was quite literally having them niggas get boat raced every time he was on the court in that series. So again, this is proof. And not to mention in the play-in game, oh my gosh, in the play-in game that he had against the Heat in, I believe, the 23-24 season. Dude, like... Oh wait, no, this might have been 22-23. Hold on. Because I know I'm not tripping. Maybe I am. Hold on. Yeah, just... Well, I might be getting that confused with something else. But he legitimately struggles against both of these teams when it gets to hot stakes ball games. And especially with the Heat. So I'm telling you right now, no matter who wins that ball game, it is probably up for Trae Young. So, yeah, everybody on the Hawks, including Trae Young, y'all better step it up as best as you can. You do not want to see either one of these teams in a situation like this. Even if their records do not suggest it, the proof is there. The stats do not lie. It's just not going to be a very good time for him. I can promise you that right now. And then for the Western Conference play-in, you have the Warriors and Grizzlies match coming on later on in the night as the second game of this doubleheader on TNT that they'll have. And there's a lot to really say about this one. I mean, the Warriors and Grizzlies have been at it for years, obviously. Obviously, they lost the play-in game in the 21 7-8 game, I believe. No, it was essentially the game for the 8 seed. They lost that matchup that went to overtime and saw Ja Morant just take everything over, bouncing them out of playoff contention. And that obviously led to the soundbite with Stephen Curry saying that teams didn't want to see them next year, essentially. And, I mean, he called it because they would then go on to beat said Grizzlies in the second round. Now, obviously, Ja Morant did get injured in that series. But a lot of craziness was going on in that series anyways. Tensions were at an all-time high, I guess. And this was fueled by Dylan Brooks just doing dirtiest shit imaginable. Klay Thompson was getting lit and everything, I guess, as well. Draymond was Draymond, of course. They got that done en route to their championship. And it's been a bit more low-key, I suppose. And then things would just heighten back up in the 24-25 season. Draymond Green and Zach Edey have been having beef. Jalen Wells has been a defensive terror and a player that had been in Stephen Curry's nightmares for quite a while after holding him to what was, I believe, the lowest total output for him in points by far this season. Well, not by far. this season and potentially a career low in scoring with just 2 points in that December matchup. That literally all the haters out there wouldn't shut the hell up about. But I mean, it did happen. So all of that criticism was warranted. You go from that 2-point game in December to him having a 52-point outing in the earlier stages of this month. So there's a lot that could really happen. The Grizzlies, it's not like they don't have a shot to win the game against this team in this situation. They have done it. They have done it. Obviously, I'm going to have faith. But it has been done before, and it could happen again. A lot of things will have to take place. Really, though, the Grizzlies did, in that last game, give themselves a fighting chance. Their game plan in the last matchup they had was perfect. Because even with Stephen Curry doing all of what he did, you still had to get a few tipping buckets from Brandon Pajemski, for example, to close out that ball game because the Grizzlies were right on their tail and they had the lead in that game through the contributions of what Ja Morant was doing. Now, I don't know if he's going to have that proficient of a game from deep, but that would certainly help matters. Obviously, their bench production is going to have to be there. And defensively, I don't know. You're just going to have to try to stay strapped to most shooters. I guess the one you don't want to leave open is Curry. But that task does become a little more difficult. Because as far as I know right now, Jalen Wells did suffer a horrible concussion injury that sidelined him. And yeah, I do not believe that he is slated to come back. So that is certainly an unfortunate situation to confront if you are the Grizzlies. I mean, that was the on-ball defender you had guarding Stephen Curry. I don't know who else they would put on him and have that kind of success against him like Jalen Wells did. I mean, I guess their next best candidate would be Vince Williams Jr. maybe. I mean, good luck with that, but I don't know. Yeah, anything's possible. And again, especially when you look at Warriors are 0-3 in playing games since its inception. Obviously, they lost against the Lakers in the first iteration of it, and then to the Grizzlies. And then last year, in the infamous Clay scoreless game that niggas won't shut up about, still just it's been around a year and we're still talking about this shit. Yes, it happened, but goddamn, he's not even there anymore. All right, but I guess that's the outlook for that game. But I guess it is relevant when you talk about the next playing game between the Kings and Mavericks. Yes, there's literally people talking about, this is crazy, man. Clay's in another elimination game between a 9 and 10 seed. Bro, it's just, oh my gosh. I just hope that for his sake, because, bro, he's a great player. He's going to be a Hall of Fame player. But the way that people just talk today, damn, you would think that this man was the fucking 12th man on the fucking bench. He was an absolute scrub for his entire career. He's not even close to that. And yet, you're gonna have a game like this in the eyes of some of these younger fans determine his legacy when they don't even know the half of it. So it's really an unfortunate spot to be put in, if you're this squad. I mean, same for Anthony Davis as well. But they got to tighten up and try to get there. Again, it's been quite the chaotic season. It didn't have to be that way. But we're here. They have a shot to maybe string together a couple of games. I guess all you can ask for, even with some of these self-inflicted wounds, is a chance. Same thing for the Kings. I mean, they made the coaching change. They started off well with Doug Christie and tailed off as the season went on. At the very least, most of their core is healthy and ready to play. So they should be able to stick it to the Mavericks. We'll see how that goes. So that is all the playoff action. In terms of the only other piece of news that I have here, apparently, the former owner of the Minnesota Timberwolves and Glen Taylor, I believe, transferred the ownership rights to Alex Rodriguez, the former MLB player for the Mariners, Yankees, Rangers, and I think another team. And also Marc, that ownership group, he would make that official just a few days ago. And, they would also state that the sale of the franchise would be put to a formal vote as well. So, I guess the group of Rodriguez and Moore are current owners, but they're also going to make sure that this is voted on and that other owners in the NBA get behind it as well. They were prefacing it, Sharanya prefaced this with some backstory, pertaining to, I guess, earlier years where Rodriguez and Moore were trying to buy the team and they were very close to doing it. I believe they inked the deal. And then Taylor wanted to revoke it, so he rescinded the move and just assumed control again, even with Moore and Rodriguez still being stakeholders at the time. So that's just a very wacky situation to be in. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Literally tomorrow. I'm going to try my best to cover the action that went on tonight, and we'll see how that goes. Peace.